Yo, what up? Sushi here. We're going to make one last video on Argenti because he deserves it. He has had a lot of value as of 1.5, and going forward, he's definitely going to be a valuable character for many players across the board. If you have Argenti, he was definitely a nice pickup for your account. But for those of you that don't have Argenti, don't worry, he is just an AoE damage dealer at his core. So apparently there has been a bug with Argenti. The bug is whenever you do kill enemies with your second charge of the ultimate, well, all of those extra multi-hits would hit the dead enemies instead of hitting the boss. So Argenti has not been getting the max amount of damage as he should have been getting. So for those of you that are Argenti mains or Argenti owners, consider this a W. So I unfortunately was not able to get Argenti, or rather I'm skipping Argenti because I'm trying to save on my funds here, and I don't want to pull for this character when there's other characters coming in the future. I'll explain why. We'll have future videos going over that. So I probably will have a hypercarry Clara showcase in this video, but just know that the Memories of Chaos currently favors Argenti. So obviously this character is going to be, performing at his best because the contents in the game is geared towards him and Clara as well. However, when you're fighting enemies that are not weak to physical, you're still dealing a lot of damage because in hypercarry teams, there's so many characters that are buffing him in order for him to deal as much damage as he can. Okay, so I have not looked at any of Argenti's Eidolons, but wow, Eidolon 1 is actually extremely strong for the character. Crit damage for the character, that is insane for an Eidolon 1. What the heck? So one of the things about Argenti is that he hasn't naturally hit harder than Clara for him to be an appealing role for many players, right? And if you have Clara and you have Argenti, you can clear as day tell who's doing more damage. Now, if you are being hit constantly with Clara, Clara is just naturally going to deal a lot of damage. But she is an RNG-like character, whereas Argenti doesn't have any RNG in his kit. Now, with some characters, Clara does become a lot better, because as of right now, not even in the current Memories of Chaos, but there's so many options of being able to provide energy to the character to where you're able to get that character's ultimate more often. But you also take into consideration that those same energy sources you give to Clara can be used for Argenti to allow him to deal even more damage as well. So any buff to Argenti is going to be a buff to Clara as well. They're kind of the same in how they work essentially. So if you're like me and you have a well-built Clara already, maybe Argenti isn't as appealing. Now I think he is a very, very, very strong damage dealer, and it does help that he has access to some very nice light cones that is pretty much tailor-made for the character. I mean, there's light cones in the game that he can use that no other characters use as well. Now, one of those options being a 4-star, and a lot of 5-star options that he can easily utilize. And thanks to his high multipliers, he's able to just take advantage of those light cones even more and the damage percentages those light cones provide for him. Now, the thing is about Clara that I think is one of the best selling points over Argenti is that this character is just very safe. She has a lot of damage mitigation. She has a lot of self-sustain, and she has a lot of damage while still being a sub-DPS. So even though you can use her in a hypercarry team, you can still slot her into other teams with other damage dealers that want to use all the skill points. But you can use her in a team with Jinglu, and she'll still perform pretty well. So that's where she shines differently than Argenti, and that makes her a much more flexible physical damage dealer than he is. And I guess one of the cool things about Clara anyways is that considering she is a standard banner character, you probably will get Eidolons for this character at some point, and some of these Eidolons are really good. 30% attack increase for just literally hitting your ultimate, and that lasts for 2 turns. Whenever you use your skill, the counter marks won't be removed on the enemy. You're able to use even more skill points on this character, and if you're using Bronya to buff up this character, she's going to deal a lot of damage with her elemental skill in the AoE. Further damage mitigation for this character is extremely strong. So whenever you do unlock this for your Clara, she's going to not only be even tankier, but have even more damage output. And Eidolon 6 allows this character to not only increase her enhanced counters by 1, but she's also able to deal even more damage because of the fixed chance to put a counter on the attacker. So that makes her very good as a solo hypercarry damage dealer. So I personally do love Clara, but whenever I could use this character, I find myself using her because she's a very hard-hitting damage dealer and she's very rewarding. Considering she has a very safe playstyle, for many players that have skill issue like me, you probably can't go wrong with using her. And as I said before, some of the characters that Argenti uses is the same characters that Clara can use in her team as well. Now, Topaz is a much more appealing option for Clara overall versus Argenti because Topaz increases the follow-up attack damage of the team. So if you have access to that character, then you can definitely slot her in replace for either Bronya or Tingyun, whoever fits your need. I would say Bronya just because you're able to give more energy to Clara, which is very nice, allowing her to get her ult more often. And instead of just having Bronya, well, you can have a character that puts out more damage and increases the follow-up attack damage of a follow-up attacker like Clara herself. And then Hua, which is very good for dual DPS teams, considering that these is two characters in here that do damage, Clara and Topaz. Well, then you have a very strong team that gets access to attack buffs and energy as well. So I could definitely see why you would want to skip Argenti, because you have some of those characters that is able to buff Clara. So therefore, you don't need another physical damage dealer that functions in these same teams she can function in herself, while having a character that is more flexible than that character as well. There's definitely many cons to Argenti versus Clara, and a lot of those are beginning to show even more. If you take into consideration that the destruction does have nice light cones, honestly better light cones than those of the Path of Erudition, then you'll find yourself being even more enticed to just skip Argenti and instead continue building or working towards a Clara you may not have on your account in the 300 pity pool. I could definitely see this being a reason why, because these light cones are very strong. So the truth of the situation here is that Hoyoverse put themselves in a very tough predicament here, because while Argenti is a great character, well, Clara isn't that far behind him. And since Clara is more flexible, that's just going to bring more enjoyment for players in the long run, because there's going to be times where you probably get tired of using Argenti in the same team. Whereas Clara, not only can you use her in hypercarry teams, you can use her in those dual DPS teams, which is on the rise currently in Honkai Star Rail, because 2 damage dealers is able to eventually put out more damage than this 1 damage dealer. That's part of the reason why Mono Quantum is actually pretty strong, which we'll talk about in a different video. And to be honest, it doesn't help the case that Argenti would find himself being valuable in the same scenarios all the other Erudition characters will be valuable, in AoE scenarios. And considering AoE scenarios is more opportunities for Clara to be hit by the enemy, that means she'll counterattack even more, dish out more damage, get more energy, and just put out more damage than Argenti sometimes. However, it does seem like Argenti is able to utilize Hanya, which is a nice selling point over Clara. Having Hanya on your team means you get more speed, more attack, you get more tailor-made physical damage buffs for Argenti, and Clara can't utilize those same buffs, because she definitely does want her speed increased, even though every other buff that Hanya provides will be very valuable in the character. Argenti can use some supports that Clara can use. But contrary to that, some characters that Argenti can use, Clara can use. And if you're using Clara as a sub DPS, well, you can use her in the same team of Yukong. And considering Yukong is a character that is able to buff everyone at the same time, well, Clara likes that anyways. So having crit rate, crit damage, attack percentage from one character, even though she's buffing your other primary damage dealer, that means Clara is just going to take advantage of a character like this even more than a character that wasn't able to use her in the first place. So that means to this day, the Path of Destruction is still running rampant. They're going to have to make some very strong characters on their paths, because as of right now, these characters are still the most appealing option in the game currently. But the truth is, if Clara did not exist in Honkai Star right now, Argenti would definitely be a much more appealing character overall, because not only would he have that elemental coverage that Clara covers, he would also have the same damage output this character offers as well. But then again, he's not as flexible as Clara. A lot of people would roll for her versus him, and honestly, she's a fun character, so she has that going for her as well. So there you have it. This is the first time we've had a character be so close to a pre-existing option in the game where you don't even need to actually go for the character that is new. Instead, you can skip the character that is new because you have the pre-existing option, or you can work towards that pre-existing option without having to spin pulls for the new option or spend money for the new option. So Hoyoverse definitely did shoot themselves in the foot with the release of Argenti, because he is literally pretty close to how Clara works, and Clara is more flexible than Argenti. So it's like, who should you go for? The character that is free, or not necessarily free, but you get at a certain point in the game by just playing the game, or do you go for the character that is so close to the character that you get for free at some point versus other characters that are coming in the near future? Right, and this is not even considering we're getting Ruan Mei, Black Swan for all of you dot enjoyers, and then Sparkle for all of you. Did I say Sparkle? Oh my god, Nabi. For all of you Mono Quantum enthusiasts. But anyways, that's the video here. Argenti is definitely not a bad character whatsoever. He is one of the strongest damage dealers in the game. It's just we have Clara. So whenever there is enemies that are weak to physical, you can just bring her also. She'll shine as well. Thank you for watching, and have a nice rest of your day. Peace.